I'm Patty Owaszczuk, and I'm owner with my partner Tony Brown of Banjo Cider, and we're sitting on our patio with our dogs.
Yeah, Sterling, the cider corgi, has joined us, so if there's barking or chasing, that's why.
Yeah, but it's all right if I call him Cheddar still.
Yes, absolutely. He'll respond to pretty much anything if he wants to listen.
Right.
So we've always been told, why do corgis have such big ears when they never listen?
They're stubborn and they don't listen.
Very
Not trainable.
stubborn. Though they're extremely trainable.
Right.
But only if they want to be trained.
Right.
Yeah. Super food focused, so.
Oh, that helps. That's the name Cheddar, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So we're here. Tell us a little bit about the property and what you're doing here.
Well, we've been here going on 11 years. We moved here from Yellowknife, so it was just a super exciting re-emergence into Ontario, like growth. That everything's green, everything's growing, and so right away we were just growing stuff and having small farm projects. We live on a farm in Ontario before Yellowknife, and we had a small orchard there of table apples, as well as organic berries and stuff. And so when we were here, we just kind of launched into growing our own vegetables. We raised some beef cows. Where one of the orchards is now, we had 2,000 asparagus plants that we sold at the gate. So for us, the genesis of this whole cider project is agriculture. That's kind of the origins for us. And we also had these, at the time, maybe a dozen really old kind of heritagey-ish apple trees around the property, or we didn't really know the varieties, and so we were just always watching them drop their apples and go to waste every fall, and kind of dreaming about doing something with them. But when the kids were a bit older a few years ago, in particular Tony, who likes, if he's going to do something, he likes to go bigger. He was just we were just in that fall period, and we're like, let's do something with these apples, and made some small batches for ourselves, and then made a bigger batch the next year, and then decided to go for it and started putting all these trees in. So we have 5 acres here on the property, and then we have another 5 acres up at one of our employees, beyond an employee, Jeff is a big part of this project. So we have apples up at his place as well, and yeah. So I'm just going to keep rambling on.
Yeah.
We also started making the kind of cider that we would want to drink, which is dry. Mm-hmm. We just happen to not really like sweeter drinks, and so that's what we started making for ourselves. And so and we work in sort of, once we'd made our own, which are just, they're just how they end up when you first start making them. We eventually, partway through the process, started working with a cider judge that we know through our other jobs, and a local guy, and he's been really instrumental and helpful for us in learning sort of the finer aspects of tasting and producing ciders that we want. So we have a range, but they're, in terms of sweetness, we have a range, but they're all towards kind of the lower end of, we've kind of graphed out what the LCBO, you can go on and grab the sugar content mm-hmm. from them, and because we're engineers, of course, we made a graph of those sugars. So we're towards like the bottom 30-40%. That is where ours, starting with just a bone dry, no sugar added, up to something, towards the top third of where ciders lie in terms of sweetness.
Which is really interesting, because you've got sort of the whole farm style process where you do a lot of availability, or a lot of different work around the land here that you're with, which is quite common for the farmhouse style ciders that are coming out, and especially when it comes to more dry, less sugar, more focused on traditional methods as opposed to commercial production.
Yeah.
And that is really quite an interesting fit to where Ontario is, because Ontario does have that huge people that are putting out 1 million liters worth of cider, and then you've got people who have work with 3 barrels and barrel age out of 3 barrels and
Right.
that's it, right?
Yeah.
So the spectrum really fits in there.
Yeah.
We're in an area here around the Uxbridge area. Have you you've seen that there's 2 blokes that have started up, Slab Town, a couple others in the area that are sort of starting to grow. Would you be bold enough to name the area, or have you heard of maybe this is a sort of an upcoming cider area?
I'd love for it to have a name and recognition as a cider place. I don't know what the critical mass is to have it be a cider destination in the way that, in my mind, Prince Edward County, Niagara. I mean, Niagara's building off the wine industry, but certainly Prince Edward County, in my mind, stands alone as a cider destination, Collingwood. So we've been working with the local municipality and the region and central counties, and I think they recognize that something's happening here, including with the craft brewery. The Second Wedge is a very well-loved, popular, and well-respected craft brewery in the town and beyond. So between all of us, we sort of have some kind of little accidental synergy going on, but maybe I'll leave it to you guys to come up with a name, and
we'll keep asking around, and we'll see if at some point something will pop up, because we are seeing such growth. Mm-hmm. You started, was it earlier this year, formally with the selling here out of the farm? Yeah, we opened the store in February, so I don't think it was much more than a month that we ran it for, which was pretty fun and exciting and different to have something like that on the property that you're just normally used to having your little rural oasis. And then we took up quite a pause when the pandemic started, just to kind of get a feel for what people were doing and not jump into it too quickly. And we did eventually set up an online store. We did delivery, we did pickup, and then once we got into stage 3, we sort of pivoted and decided to turn our brand new parking lot into a patio, and that's been going really well. It's been very challenging with COVID. Coming in as a start gives you a sense of a little bit of a start-stop, as you said. Have you thought about the changes that have happened when you got started to where you're at now? Are there any new challenges that you're facing? I mean, we're sort of, I would guess a lot of small cideries and companies in general, you're just making it up as you go along anyway. And so to have this challenge thrown at us, yeah, it's very different, and it's not what we thought our summer would be, but it's still been kind of an exciting journey, and we've had a great response with everything we do. There's a lot of local support, so we're at the farmers market too. So the farmers market, when it opened, the organizers were very top-notch at getting it safe, getting all their permissions, and they were one of the few markets open. And so it was just, I think people were bored and they wanted to support their local businesses, and it went really well. We do really well at the market this year despite the pandemic. And then people, same thing, they're bored, they saw we have an online store, it's a new business they've heard of, so they would order online, and we did much better than we expected, given, society was in a lockdown. What offerings do you have? So what are our varieties? We have, like I mentioned, our bone dry is called Revival, and that's a nod to what you were saying about their traditional methods. So we do use a very long ferment and aging process, and get to a malolactic fermentations, however many the cider wants to kind of go through. And so that kind of allows us to make a drier cider that has a little more flavor, and a little smoother without being too harsh. The malolactic fermentation smooths it out a bit. So, and then our next driest is Heart of Gold. It's a single varietal just from golden russet apples, so which is more, I'm sure you're aware, just more of a cider apple, it's a crossover kind of apple, so it can stand alone a bit. And then our number 3 is Rouge, so we fermented that with dark cherries,
and we added a touch of local maple syrup to it, just enough to bring out the flavors and the complexities of the two fruits. Our number 4 is dueling banjos. So the dueling is the tartness from a crabapple reduction that we made, and a sweetness from an apple juice reduction, and because they're reductions, there's quite a lot of flavor. And then our 5th is a dry hopped cider that also has some buckwheat honey in there for a bit of maltiness.
What got you into the process of making cider beyond the fact that you had an abundance of unique fruits to be able to play with?
Right. I would say the real drive there came from Tony, my partner, who is a very capable MacGyver-y, can kind of build anything, right? I think I would have been intimidated to be like, you know, before you've made it and you've only made it home and you want to scale up to big tanks and connections and hoses and the hygiene to keep the product a good quality and to not have losses and just everything, the infrastructure of it. I don't know that I would have been too intimidated probably. That is not intimidating to him at all. That is his bag. And so I think he loves to have a big project. He needs a big project like that. So I would say that combined with our agricultural sensibilities made it just a very easy thing for us to step into. One thing I didn't mention was our orchards we use organic practices for the orchards. So we use mulches around the trees to keep the the grass down. We use some hand weeding and hand hoeing. We spray with microbes, and we focus on the health of the tree more than we don't use any chemical pesticides or herbicides, and we can do that in part because the cider apple doesn't have to be perfect. It's not a table apple. It can have some blemishes, and we did grow table apples, I mentioned, at our other farm near Alliston, and it was stressful. I mean, the pressure to make a beautiful apple, and even though you can spray certain organically approved sprays, they're not the nicest thing. So here with them being cider apples, it's been great for us to just be able to grow in the way that we normally grow stuff.
Much more natural process than what's happened before. Yeah. And the ugly apples often make the best cider. So.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't need to put this in, but just for clarity, that they're not producing yet. You saw it, they're small. They're a little bigger in the back. But we did a citizen cider project last year where we said to the people around, bring your apples, we'll buy them off you. And we got tons of apples, like around 6,000 pounds of apples. I think we made close to 1,500 liters, and it was pears, apples, quince, heritage apples, crab apples, and it has a very, it was risky because it could have just failed, but the cider tastes good, so we're excited to get it out in a couple months probably.
Excellent.
And that's it.
And that I'm glad we continued on, because now I have an idea myself to. And this is summer of 2020. You're open what hours, and where can people get more information?
They should always check our website if they're coming from further than Uxbridge, because we are changing as we adapt. But right now, our bottle shop's open Wednesdays and Fridays, 3 to 7, and the patio's open Saturdays, 1 to 6. And then we're at the Uxbridge Farmers Market, which is in the parking lot of Second Wedge, Sundays 9 to 2. Our hours are fairly limited because we're also still trying to achieve like a life balance for ourselves. We're running the orchards, we're making the cider, we're selling the cider. We've got 3 kids still that live at home, and so we're just always trying to not let it balloon up into something that we don't even enjoy anymore.
And then adding on the career and the job and all that
exactly,
as well, right?
Yeah, not to mention our normal day jobs,
Exactly. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it for the time to be able to chat.
Yeah, thank you. It was fun.